So I'm gonna wait for now. So this has been fired on. Let me double check. Yeah.
If not, would you have to do that all over?
Yeah, I'd have to redo it.
So,
I'm gonna move this here for you so I don't mess it up.
Okay.
And then we'll demo this one because Denise wants to put different glazes in here, so it's a really easy way to do that. All right, so here's your sheets. You might want to hold on to this, and you can read over it while we're glazing. So it's just basic steps. We'll just talk about this a little bit. So I'm gonna go over this real slow, but keep it real simple. Glazing doesn't have to be too complicated. The reason it gets complicated is because, one, I might make it seem very stressful, but it is because I want to make sure you end up with something you really enjoy. So when you go to glaze, the first thing you want to do is know what it is. The glaze, it has silica in it, which melts to form glass. So remember that. It's melting, it's making glass. So people are like, can I put glass in my piece? I'm like, you don't really need to. It melts to make glass. So once you start, glass melts at a real low temperature. So people that put glass in their piece, it will melt, and it just stays at the bottom. It's just going to melt and pool at the bottom. It won't give you these interesting drippy effects or anything like that. So we don't really need to know what's all the ingredients of the glaze. If you're going to school for it, it's important. But the one thing about all these glazes to remember is they're either gloss, matte, or satin. So satin would be this here. It doesn't have as much sheen. It's more of a satin, and it feels kind of soft, a soft buttery feel to it. Then you have a real high gloss one here with the clear, and then you have a matte that's like this. And this is the only glaze that's not food safe, this matte, where there's no shine to it at all. That means it's a real soft glaze. So from people using forks or things like that, they can pick up those chemicals. We try to get most glazes that are food safe. Up here has a listing of it. I'm gonna make a bigger one than this. Put it up here so people can read better. Your transparent glazes says good over under glazes. So I'm about to put a glaze over this. I can add some new ones to it. Glaze Y, you can do that. But Coyote Clear, Aqua, Key Lime, Golden Green, Sand Copper, Glaze X, those are the only ones I can choose from. Now, we have this tester up here next to the underglazes. That shows you what, if you have underglaze, if I use, can you pass that to me? So this is just a simple tester just to let you know, if you can't read up here, each little square here is a different glaze. So here's golden green. It looks great with red, but it turns the green brown. So that's where you want to kind of make sure you look at this before you dip it. If you have a lot of, see, I don't have any green here. So I could dip this in golden green, have an amber color on the inside and the outside, but I want something more bright and colorful. If you put underglaze and put floating blue, you lose all your underglaze, right? So there's no point in using that. So when you're using underglaze, underglaze is basically the paint of clay. You can paint, draw imagery, do whatever you want, whatever you see is what you get. Then you want to put a transparent glaze over that to create that effect. Now if you just want it to look the way it is, you just dip it in clear. To prepare your clay, you want to make sure it's dusted off, especially if you have this stuff that's been sitting on your shelf for a while. It's collecting dust. So you just take a damp sponge and wipe it down real well, and then you're good to glaze. These have already been wiped down. Avoid sanding your piece. So when you sand it, you notice it says clay dust is harmful to breathe. So that's why we use a lot of sponges in here, and you don't want to be like sanding off the dust and breathing it in. You can do that outside. The green Scotch-Brite pad that you may see around that I use, that's used on bone-dry clay, not on bisque clay. I see people try to use it on bisque clay. The key to sanding, this is a life lesson, whatever you're sanding, the object that you're sanding with has to be harder than the object you're sanding. So that green Scotch-Brite pad is not harder than bisque clay, so it won't do anything but maybe make your piece green. Then you want to wax your foot. So we can even look at this, or this is a little glazing info here. They may be applied many ways, so don't eat and drink when you're doing that. I'm drinking coffee, but I'm not like touching the glaze or anything like that. My teacher always said to have a covered lid. In here, we kind of take liberties, because if OSHA comes in here, then we run like hell. But we're okay. So wax, keep 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. So that means is, you can use your finger. If I do this, where it touches, I can wax. Now, I'm to the point where I just wax this and know it's not going to leak because I'm doing one glaze. If you're in doubt, if you're putting more than one glaze, you may want to wax higher up on your foot. If you don't like the raw look of clay, like I said, you can just put underglaze and you're good to go. So you always want to wax. Do we know why we wax?
So we don't screw your kiln up.
That's not the number one reason. That is a good reason. The reason we wax is you don't want glaze at the bottom because it'll melt and stick to the kiln. Or if I don't know, it'll stick to the sand and stuff like that and your piece will be all cruddy like this. So, but the main reason we wax the bottom is because I have 55 students in here. Multiply that by like 5 pieces a person. If everybody dips and then wipes the glaze off the bottom, we're losing all that glaze. Instead, when I dip this, it should just run right off the bottom and then I'm good to go. So that's why we basically wax, is to prevent the glaze from sticking on the bottom, from sticking on the shelf, and also to save glaze. Now, this one's ready to go. So you have your foot's waxed, you're ready to go. This foot's not waxed. I'm just gonna do the inside of this one because I still wanna paint the outside a little bit. So this one's gonna be dipped all in one glaze, key lime. This one I'm gonna put key lime on the inside and pour it out, okay? So you can do different color inside and outside. I can leave this raw on the outside if I want. I don't have to have a glaze on the outside of it. If I'm gonna be doing these two in the same glaze, key lime, first you wanna do is stir your glaze. How do you stir your glaze? You have a couple of different options. You have these whisk here, or you have the drill here. You just wanna make sure it's all clean, because you don't want to have other glazes going into the bucket because it will contaminate it eventually. Might be a small amount, but eventually it'll get contaminated. So if you're using this, I'll show you how not to stir. All right, I'm done. Not stirring that way, okay? You want to stir it really well, and for those of you, you may want to come up close to see this because it's sludge. Okay? When these glazes get low, it's gonna be a little thicker. So you don't want to hit the bottom. If you look at these jars right here, you can see how the jars have sludge at the bottom and the water's on the top. But what it is all the metal, the heavy particles are falling to the bottom. So you gotta stir this really, really well. You might actually add a little water to this because I can tell it's been thickened up a bit. So what happens is water evaporates. So the lids aren't on right, or if it's just sitting uncovered for a while, or if someone hasn't stirred it all the way. If they don't stir it all the way, they pick up all that water, and then it makes the glaze thicker because it's losing water, okay? So to test it, you don't ever add water. You can always just ask me. And then I just test this with my finger. So that one, actually it's okay. I'm just stirring, trying to get the bottom picked up again. And that should be good, just like that. Take this, just stuff this in there. Hopefully you have enough to fit the whole cup in there without hitting the bottom. So first thing I do is I'm gonna take this, dip the tongs, put this in. It's not touching anywhere. I'm good. I'm just gonna go. That's it. That's why we wax. The wax falls down. Just comes off like that, and I'm good. Now if I wanted to dip this in another glaze, let this dry, and I'd have to wipe this. But if you dip in another glaze, this is gonna stay wet while this will dry. All right. If you just have patience, you can either do this, put it down, and lightly let go of it, or once it's dry, let go of one handle, gently pull it out, and you're done. Okay. Second one, same thing. Dip. Tongs, make sure they're not touching anywhere. Maybe if it's not enough glaze, I'll just tilt it. Oh, get a little high on the wax right there. You can hear it. So this will dry real quick. You see it's bubbling, absorbing into the clay. So at this point, it's going to dry really quick. If I dip another glaze, it's going to dry even slower. Think of a sponge. A bisque clay is like sponge. It can only take so much before it gets too thick. So if you put it on and then it's taking forever to dry off, you just might have too much glaze. The longer it sits in the bucket, the more glaze it absorbs. So with that said, what if I want the inside a different color than the outside? Well, what you have to do for that is you pour it in and pour it out. I always do my inside first, what I call the liner glaze. And that's because if I did the outside first, when I go to pour out, you'll probably see a little drip happen on the sides here. Now this guy hasn't been waxed yet, but this has been fired on. So I just want this yellow to be a little bit less intense. So here's the key lime. It kind of just mutes it down a little bit. Okay, so for this technique, the glaze is all stirred. You want to get a cup. Also, this underglaze has been fired on. So if I get a drip, I can wipe it off and it doesn't mess up my underglaze. So the more work you put into your underglaze, you want to fire it on. So that way it doesn't mess up your exterior. Okay. So I pour this in. And then I slowly pour it out and turn like that. Let it drip a little bit down. And I can choose to just say, okay, that's it. And I just want to fire it like that. Or maybe I want to dip a clear on the outside or a different transparent glaze. You can do that. So I'll let this dry and